frenzy, Lord Vyke. My shadow that weakened my flame to mere embers. I shall hunt thee to the ends of this world.
Hey everyone, I'm Bite-Sized Otaku, and this is Frenzy Lord Vyke, an improved version of the vanilla Vyke cosplay we explored in the previous video, with a few additions thrown in while keeping to the character's theme. We'll be exploring how this build competes in the lens between, but like the video and give it to me bite-sized. So for our equipment, I've kept the fingerprint helm and chest piece to help us get that frenzied look, but I swapped out the rest of our equipment for the scaled greaves and gauntlets, which will provide us with good defense and an increase in poise, boosted by the Bullghost talisman, which we'll cover in a moment. Then we have our talismans, where I've opted for the Great Jar's Arsenal for a 19% boost to our equip load, and the Erdtree Favour plus 2 will boost our HP by 4%, our stamina by 10%, and our equip load by 8%. This will be important because our equipment is heavy and therefore we'll need to maximize our equip loads without having to dump all of our stats into endurance. Then we have the Spear Talisman, which will boost our counter attack damage by 15% on thrusting weapons. Counter attack is simply put, trading an attack with an enemy where you both damage each other simultaneously, which will benefit our War Spear. Then lastly we have the Bullghost Talisman for a 33% boost to our poise, which will help us not get staggered when hit by smaller weapons. For our weapons, I've opted for 2 Vyke's War Spears instead of 1, which combine to make a borderline broken crouch and guard attack, alongside providing us with a moveset currently being used in the meta. We still have Frenzy Flame Thrust as our weapon art for that explosion of madness, which we will use to occasionally pressure our opponents. A new addition to our build is the Fingerprint Shield, which doubles up as a top class guard and a weapon for attacking due to our weapon art Shield Crash. Shield Crash will charge the shield towards our enemies for both damage and frenzy build up, while the blocking can defend against pretty much anything except certain weapons or weapon arts, including status effects. Then we have the Frenzy Flame Seal for our incantations, and we'll be using the Flame of the Frenzy, Unendurable Frenzy, Frenzied Burst, and Inescapable Frenzy. I've removed Howl of Shibiri as the cons outweigh the benefits for me personally, but it might be useful if you wanted to focus on the dual spears while maximizing damage. For our stats, we have 39 endurance, which is just enough for medium rolling, and 52 vigor, which was the highest I can get for this setup. But we'll be using the 48 strength for the shield, and 20 dexterity for our weapon requirement. Then the 31 faith is a minimum requirement for our incantations, including the Undurable Frenzy. This is based on a level 137 Vagabond, with all equipment upgraded 1 level below the maximum, which will avoid you having to use a rare Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone. So I won't be covering any PvE applications, as we established in our last video that Madness and Frenzy style attacks are better suited for PvP due to enemy resistances and minimized damage in PvE. But for our strategy, we have 3 main tactics we can use to win our encounters. The first is a combination of attacks using all of our equipment, where we can block with our shield and poke from behind for a small amount of damage, or we could combine incantations with a combination of weapon strikes like jumping attacks, rolling attacks, running heavies or regular thrusts. This tactic is one I tend to start out with to feel out my opponent, as I try to gauge what tricks they have up their sleeve and figure out the best response. The next strategy is a Shield Crash method with a poke, which involves using Shield Crash to damage enemies alongside building up that frenzy and blocking their attacks, responding with a poke from behind the shield. This tactic is very effective but risky, as we're vulnerable to attacks like Piercing Fang, which bypass shields, alongside scythes and other weapons which inflict status effects. The Shield Crash can also leave you vulnerable and can miss the target due to poor tracking, so don't depend solely on this combination alone. But then there's the meta tactic, which is the crouching guard attack on the dual great spears. This is a tactic that you've likely seen being used in the arena, with dual cross Naginatas, the Lance, Tree Spear, Serpent Hunter, or any combination of that weapon class. The attack will quickly thrust both weapons into the enemy for massive damage, and with a good amount of poise, you can trade blows with this to stagger enemies, build up madness, and follow up with another thrust which has the potential to roll catch. The risk with this tactic is that our attacks are still slower than other weapon types, meaning we can get hit before our attack launches, and the range can be deceptively short, resulting in attacks sometimes not reaching the target. This combination also has a fantastic jumping guard attack, which thrusts both dual spears into the ground, which I often don't like, but in this case I've managed to catch some people with the Phantom range, making it a deadly combination. Quickly covering some of the newer incantations, Unendurable Frenzy is similar to the Flame of Frenzy, except it follows up with a circular flurry of flaming bolts. Unescapable Frenzy is extremely difficult to land in PvP, as it requires a standing target, has unreliable hitboxes, and a gentle breeze can stagger you out of the animation, but it inflicts massive damage and madness build up. And finally, on our weaknesses, we'll suffer against super quick opponents like quickstep users, dual swords, daggers, or other super ranged attacks like spears. You're also vulnerable to status build up, as our shield will not block the build up of sleep, bleed and other effects. Looking back, this is probably one of the best authentic cosplay builds which can actually compete with the meta in PvP by combining some of the most broken equipment and combinations in the game with a series of ranged incantations. While we may struggle against quicker enemies or other meta combinations like sleep or other dual spear users, we can pretty much counter everything else with an authentic look that screams Vyke in his final form. But let me know your thoughts on the build and of course subscribe. This is Bite-Sized Otaku and I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, boy.
You dizzy, bruh!